Hey everybody, what is going on? Welcome back to another Citrus Corner. We got a very juicy but sticky show for you today with a lot of interesting topics from Disney canceling out the Lake Nona project for Imagineers, talking about the Galactic Starcruiser's final departure. Woo, that's a shocker. And some other things in the pipeline as well coming up here on Citrus Corner as part of OG 55. Welcome back, folks, to Citrus Corner. Before we get into all the juicy topics today, let me introduce to you my panel, my brothers, my comrades, my family. You know, you got to introduce the family. I'm going to start down below with Mr. VashSky, Dr. Dre the DA, the man who wears many hats. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing pretty good. It's been quite the time in the news, hasn't it? This is extraordinary what's actually going on in the Walt Disney Company. Not often seen, so I can't wait to actually break it down with you guys for sure. But and if any of you would like to follow me at home, you can go do so right down there at VashSky. Just go ahead and type that in, and it should pop up for, as Christine Waysons McCarthy would say, for all the
robust
discussion right there. And if you want to see me, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right now in Orange Grove 55, where we have many great shows, including the one you're watching, Citrus Corner, hosted by my dear friend George right over here. Orange Grove 55 and Orange Nerd, hosted by my dear friend right here. And Story Geeks with Jay, where we have discussions about the stories that most impact our lives, and including my own Freshly Squeezed, your source for juicy news and info, squeezed fresh right from the Grove.
Awesome. And of course, the guy that doesn't need no introduction, but hell, we're going to give him one anyway. The master of this channel, Mr. OG55 himself. How are you doing today, sir?
Well, thank you, George. Thank you so much, brother. I cannot wait to talk about all kinds. We're talking Lake Nona today. We're talking the Starcruiser, you know, this massive success of called the Starcruiser. We're talking the Minions Cafe. It's going to be a lot of fun. I cannot wait to talk shop with you. Thank you so much.
And now your host,
Disney Fan Man 23, Citrus George.
Thank you very much. I'm going to have to change that down here. I'm going to have to add that in there. So, as Mr. VashSky always says, you know, let's get into it. Let's. How do you say it, brother? I just went blank.
Oh, let's. Do you mean let's dispense with the pleasantries?
There we go. There we go. Absolutely. So we're going to start off with the first topic that Disney Imagineering was supposed to relocate to Lake Nona, Florida, from Glendale, California, as a big multi-billion-dollar expansion that was supposed to be utilized to help out with the state and Walt Disney World and what have you. Well, if you think things couldn't get any crazier of what's going on down there in Florida between state legislator and Walt Disney World, and even just the Walt Disney Company in general, that Disney had announced that they are canceling said plans, all due to the ongoing battle between the Walt Disney Company and the Florida governor, Ron DeSantis, and his PR people. And I mean, this wasn't really too big of a surprise for me. I think in the long run, I was expecting for Iger to kind of make this kind of move, because this was always up in the air, you know, what was to become of the Lake Nona project. And I just think right now, I mean, as much as I would love to see progression move forward with Walt Disney World, I'm for sure it will in the near future. But I think Disney and Iger is going to have to put investments and money towards places that actually, you know, want the business in a sense, you know, and Florida right now is not one of those places. And you guys did a great video just recently talking with Casual and Bob when they went to the I don't know the exact, the Disneyland Forward meeting, and so you could see like so much, being harvest into Disneyland Forward, and then you're seeing so much being kind of sucked out of Walt Disney World that it's pretty much safe to say this is the route that Iger is going to go right now. But what do you fellas think?
It's interesting. When this was announced, there was a lot of pushback with Imagineering, right? Like a lot of these creatives did not want to move to Florida for whatever reason, whether it's uplifting their family. And, a lot of these Imagineers have kids that are going to school and what have you. They don't want to move to another state and have it impact their kids. A lot of it was political. A lot of it was political. Can't deny that. They didn't want to move to Florida with Governor Ron DeSantis and all that stuff. So there was a lot of. It was a very demoralizing announcement for a lot of Imagineers, and just the way Chapek kind of handled it with like, either you do it or you're out. It was kind of just handled really poorly with Chapek and his whole administration. So I think that this was a good move by Iger because I think, number one, I think it will boost morale for Imagineering overall. I know there are some people, apparently we hear today that from this realtor that apparently a lot of these Imagineers wanted to, there you go. Disney employees relocated to Orlando from California prefer to stay. So there's going to be an element there that wants to stay in Orlando, and that's fantastic. And I hope Bob Iger and Disney can actually accommodate those people. Maybe do work from home if their job allows it. But overall, though, I think it was a good decision. I think Imagineering should stay in California. I know there's a case to be made. Like, look, you know what? If you have your premier kind of resort in Florida, it makes sense to have Imagineering out there. On paper, it kind of does, but do you really need it, right? Because if you look at Imagineering, for 70 years, they've been able to, 70 plus years, they've been able to create really, really great experiences worldwide being based out of Glendale. Like all the stuff that we see at Tokyo Disney Sea and all that stuff came from Glendale. They don't have a Tokyo Imagineering office. And yet magically they were able to come up with some pretty great concepts. So I think it's fine where it is. And I think that what you do is you also prevent more talent loss, and you might even attract more talent back. Right, a lot of people that moved on from the company that no longer works at Disney because of this move. Maybe they can move them back. This might also be, a lot of people aren't talking about this, but this might also be a Bruce Vaughn decision. Remember, Disney brought Bruce Vaughn back, and I'm sure it cost them a pretty penny to do so. Bruce Vaughn might be making moves too, saying, hey, look, I want to reverse this decision. I want to see if I can bring people back into the fold. This is the best way to do it. So overall, I think it's a positive thing. Now, real quick, before I go to Dre, I just want to share something real quick because this was brought to my attention by our good friend, Gator Fan 15. And Gator Fan asked a former Imagineer, Tom K. Morris, a question. And I think Tom's response was pretty spot on, actually. So Gator Fan asked here, not talking about the politics of it all, but what's your opinion of Imagineering staying in California, really in regards to the quality of attractions developed in the future? Interested in your opinion, as I know how much you care about Walt Disney World. And Tom said here, the WDI headquarters should stay in the LA area, preferably on Flower Street. The heart and DNA of Disney's parks is not the theme park industry, it's the film, theater, and entertainment industry. As WDI has moved a little bit away from that, I believe the product sometimes suffers. And Tom brings up a great point here. When Walt created Imagineering, WED, it was very much the studio guys, and I think mostly out of necessity, but it was the studio guys that were brought in to create these attractions. And Imagineering has gone away from that as time has gone on, and you have more like these career themed, this career themed talent, right? It's no longer studio people kind of doing the Imagineering. And I do think that Disney should get back to that. I think they should incorporate more studio people into Imagineering. And the best way to do that is to remain in LA. Now, will they do that? I don't know. But Tom brings up a fantastic point here. I mean, that was the heart of Imagineering, was all those studios, because they understood story. They understood how to frame, when you're going through these attractions, they're very much framed like a movie, right? And so they understood that. A lot of this new generation of Imagineers, they don't get that because they don't have that film background. Go ahead, George. I'm sorry, brother.
No. I was just going to say, and that does make sense, because the R&D department in Imagineering has worked tightly with these masters in the filmmaking industry of how they kind of can bring elements that's in film and television and place them in the attractions. And that's why Disney's attractions are so realistic and so set apart from other just basic amusement park attractions. But before I get to you, Dre, and maybe you can incorporate this in your thoughts as well, do you feel that the whole reason as why they were going to move Imagineering to Lake Nona in the very beginning, do you feel that that was a part because of what the state of California was going through at the time, from the pandy and the shutdown? It was closed for 412 days and a lot of going back and forth with the California governor. So do you think that was the whole purpose, that they were going to relocate? And now that they're having issues with the Florida governor, they're retracting that issue. What do you think, Dre?
No, I actually don't believe that the politics of the situation, when it concerns Newsom or even DeSantis, play that much into this. Now, the company is doing what they should be and citing that as one of the reasons why they're actually doing this. And you have some of the media allies out there saying, amid dispute, Disney cancels a big Lake Nona project costing upwards of $1 billion or so. That's a key figure, which we'll get back into in a moment. But remember, though, it's amid, not over. Yeah. I think that's most accurate. Now, the company is citing that because of its battle, which is a strategic move, like I said. But more so is about, if you want to consider why they were moving out of California and to Florida in the first place, a lot of that had to do with the regulatory environment in the state. A lot of that had to do with taxes and so forth that they were going to end up paying had they stayed there. This was really kind of a long-term move for them, which is kind of weird why it was kind of a very short term in terms of the relocation effort there. We have commented before, OG, on this channel before, that I would have given that, about a 10-year move, and I wouldn't have necessarily, forced everybody to move by that time. I would have basically said, hey, look, listen, we are moving the headquarters over here in this kind of slow transition process. Anybody who retires from Imagineering in Glendale, well, that will be that. And any renewed headcount will be added to the Florida location specifically. Because honestly, they had worked out with the state of Florida, and in that kind of Lake Nona area where this was actually going to be positioned a long time before the announcement was actually made, and they had secured tax subsidies. They had secured some additional investment opportunities from the state in order to facilitate this transition, this move, but honestly, because it was a long-term venture and so forth, it was really predicated on the level of investment Disney was going to make at the time. And honestly, if it was upwards of $1 billion at a time when you're trying to save $5.5 billion, that's kind of a knock against it. Also, too, it was a very unpopular decision by the people actually working in Imagineering. And in fact, some people have actually said that the people who really kind of pushed the company to make a statement on the political happenings in Florida were some of the people who were a little bit upset that they had to move and wanted to kind of put pressure on Chapek, make his life basically miserable at the top. It's a very interesting discussion there. But because it was kind of a Chapek era move, and because, yes, you could save money long term, they absolutely would. Is it necessarily worth putting up money now to do that? I think the calculation was made, and I think for Iger, who wants morale to improve at WDI, who wants to save as much money as he possibly can, and for the optics of actually, sticking it to DeSantis at this crucial period, I think all of those things kind of combined as to when this decision was made, for which I have heard it was months ago. And when this was actually announced, it's very, very interesting. Mickey Views actually had some extended thoughts on this in his video, which I employ everybody to actually take a look at. But I just want to go ahead and play this one clip right here as to why Bob Chapek felt that this move was beneficial for the company, not just on a a tax level, but actually on a creative level as well, as it relates to Imagineering. So I'll let this play.
The
Now,
primary
real quick,
reason is not.
Oh, sorry about that.
I was going to say real quick before we play the clip. Also, I think that Iger, and you're spot on, Andre, but I want to add too. I think that Iger saw. Look, you can save some money with this move, but you also lose, as we talked about many times on this channel, that institutional memory. A lot of legacy people left, the experience at Imagineering left because of this move. So I think Iger, and smartly so, was like, well, okay, we're going to save a few bucks on this taxing, but at what cost, essentially, right?
And that's a crucial thing there, OG, because you were talking about how the Imagineers that are kind of, let's say, greener around the edges, lack that kind of cinematic experience for their portfolio, right? They also lack a little bit of life experience because a lot of these guys are being hired straight out of design school and like thrust into these roles. And people wonder like, ooh, like why is Imagineering relearning the same lessons that they had learned before? Why are they making mistakes they have made before? For people who have like watched Imagineering closely over the last 30 years or so, why is this stuff happening? It's because, just like OG said, there's a lack of institutional memory, there's a lack of life experience, and there's a lack of a kind of cinematic experience as well. But I kind of want to play this portion of it because it kind of reveals what Chapek had in mind and how that might differ from Iger.
The primary reason is not having anything to do with the current politics in Florida, but rather the fact that the guy who is driving the project, Chapek, is gone. We know that Iger doesn't like Chapek. He doesn't want to do Chapek's projects. And then secondly, employees don't want this. And also Disney's sizing down their managerial positions, which would be the people occupying those offices. A lot of them, unfortunately, are being laid off right now. And ultimately, Disney doesn't have the money to spare at the moment for something like this, which is a non-essential expense, sort of a long-term plan that Chapek had. It was an interesting plan that Chapek had here. It was a long-term cost savings measure, in my opinion. Basically, I think the reason why Chapek wanted Imagineering in Florida is it would allow them to get cheaper Imagineers. Essentially, they'd be able to hire out of some of the art schools we have down here, make Imagineering even more of a revolving door where they recruit students and they say, hey, you can put Imagineering on your resume, and they're in and out, they do an internship and then they're on to other things. Basically a way to farm a lot of talent, get a lot of kids, to get some work done on the cheap. And I think that was part of the plan there for sure.
So that's kind of the dynamic that's occurring right now in Imagineering.
So that really would make sense to OG's point that from bringing Bruce Vaughn back, maybe he really did have a little bit of a say-so, relying that back to Iger and say, you know what, I think this was probably not the right way to go about doing it. Let's see, you recruited me back. Let's see if we can get maybe some of the seasonal Imagineers and kind of cut it at the leg, so to speak, to not have this kind of quote unquote revolving door of Imagineers.
The 6-month timeline I thought was a real big misstep. Had they extended that out or dilated that time out, I think it would have maybe been perceived differently. When you're talking, especially sort of post-Pandy, as it were, when this actual thing was announced, when you're saying you've just been through a very, very tough year, as we all did, and then it's like uproot the entire family in 6 months and move out here, or else you don't have a job. I think that was like a real kind of slap in the face for the creatives, especially with this very esteemed institution. Regarding how to go about things, I think that would have been, I think it would have all been perceived very differently had it been a very slow process of transition, and maybe the company could have facilitated, a way to move everybody out there over like a 10-year period or so, and then finally end up in Lake Nona, Florida. The fact that they were trying to rush this thing, I think just maybe could have doomed this from the start.
And honestly, I really have no problem with them canceling out something like this if they really truly know that it's not going to work or it's going to hurt the company in the long run. I'd rather them kind of take a step back and move a little bit more slow than to hurry up and rush something into something that could be very, I don't want to say detrimental, but I mean, cost effective in time, that it won't be on Disney's side in the long run.
Well, yeah, and with Chapek, and we've been very fair with Bob Chapek on this channel, like to the point where I've been called a shill and all kinds of bullshit. But the fact of the matter is, every idea Chapek had was not a bad idea. I mean, I don't believe in one-dimensional bad guys, media and stuff. They love that, right? With Chapek, there was more nuance to it. And I've defended him in many cases. But with this, it just felt like, it was like kind of pointless. Like Imagineering has shown us over and over and over and over again that they can design for any area around the world and do it very competently. Like I've said with Tokyo, they've done it many times. Paris, they've done it. So it wasn't even like, I just didn't understand the point of it, right? Like why even make it? It seems like an expensive move, and it doesn't really help creativity in my opinion, because like I've said before with Tokyo, they seem to be just perfectly creative in Glendale when creating stuff for Tokyo. So it really was a penny pinching move. I think Mickey Views is right. I think it was a money saving endeavor, just to kind of have more of a revolving door at Imagineering. And I think ultimately it would have hurt the product for, generations. Ultimately, this could have been a really long term hit. And for what? For some tax breaks? It wasn't worth the trade off. Not at all.
I will say, we say long-term problems. They were experiencing tons of problems in the short term relating to this. Obviously, cast members were very disgruntled and took that out in various ways. But also, too, they lost about 90% of the headcount at Imagineering just from this move right here. All of that institutional memory walking out the door, all of those, what people would say some of the greatest creatives in this industry just walking out the door. It's a real big problem right there. And I think Iger is kind of interested in maybe enticing those people back as much as he could anyway when you're downsizing at this current time. But this will have, even if it's not being pursued to its fullest, this will still have ramifications for the company, and that is tragic.
Yeah. And even a lot of people are saying online, that it was, this is another hint that, Disney World's not going to get the love that it needs, especially with everything that's going on with the politics right now. But I think in the long run, by doing this, it would actually kind of benefit Disney World, because if you're going to then be bringing in these revolving door Imagineers, then the quality is just going to be in the shitter.
Exactly.
So I think as you both had pointed out, bringing maybe some of the seasonal people back, or the people that couldn't do this move, keeping it in Glendale, it could still benefit Walt Disney World, because Dre, you pointed out earlier that, or OG, I think it was OG, that you even mentioned Tokyo. That also goes for Walt Disney World as well. Everything that came out of all these projects came from Flower Street.
Right. Yeah, 100%. Imagineering is very capable of creating attractions around the world that impress us. Look at Mystic Manor over in Hong Kong. There's no Imagineering headquarters in Hong Kong, but they managed to make an incredible attraction with Mystic Manor. So it can be done. For whatever reason. Look, and I'm not going to deny that there is a bias at Imagineering for Disneyland. There's absolutely a bias for Disneyland. They treat Disneyland, and rightfully so. It's Walt's Park. Come on. I'm appreciative that they take a lot of care with Disneyland. But even with DCA, the Imagineers don't care as much. You can just tell. It's not even like a California bias. It's just a Disneyland bias. So, and I see that. Hey, Florida fam, I get it. I understand what you're going through. You feel like Disneyland gets all the love, and then the leftovers happen over there in Florida. Well, we get leftovers here, and we get kind of half-ass efforts here as well in California with DCA. So we get it as well. There is a Disneyland bias in Imagineering, and that has to stop. Cool. I support the Glendale move. Stay here in Glendale, but Imagineering, you have to start taking these other parks and other resorts more seriously. I'm seeing way too much bias. Let's get DCA moving here, man. I get it. Disneyland needs their 50-30 ticket of the this year, but can DCA get some freaking love for once? Can Florida get some love? We have parks in Florida that are falling apart. There's not enough to do in some of these parks, and it's just like they're sleeping on it. So Imagineering needs to step it up. So okay, you're keeping your home here in Glendale, but let's work on that though. That's something they really have to focus on. We got it. Step it up. Go ahead, Dre.
I think in the future, if they want to invest majorly into Florida, which I think they do, you can always have a satellite site or something, which they did for Epcot. I believe it's still there in the same place that it was. You can expand that satellite site out, and so that you can kind of gear projects that are being built for Florida in Florida if you want to. But moving the headquarters, that's a big move. Go ahead, George. Sorry.
Oh no, you're fine. Yeah, like the parks in Florida, Magic Kingdom is pretty much safe to say it's doing good. Eventually, to expand capacity would be great if we can get that What If Beyond Big Thunder expansion. That would be absolutely phenomenal. Epcot's going through a transitional phase right now. That's doing fairly okay. And then plus you have like World Showcase, you still have stuff to do. The two parks that really need the major work is Animal Kingdom and Hollywood Studios. Right. Animal Kingdom is due for something way beyond to the fact that they hit it a grand slam with Pandora, but they can't just rely on that one land and those two attractions to withhold up for so long. Animal Kingdom needs to grow, it needs to expand, and they have to do something. Even with, as much as I love the dinos, Showcase is going to grill me for this one, but something needs to be done with Dino Land. Whether you like it or not, something needs to be done with it. Yeah. And Hollywood Studio. Oh, sorry, Dre. Before you.
Well, I was just going to say, I think something will be done eventually in Animal Kingdom, and Disney's Hollywood Studios might have gained a little more land.
And thank you. That's actually what I was going to. You're speaking my language, Dre. So, kind of segueing into that, the Galactic Starcruiser is taking its final flight September 28th and ends on September 30th. And this is a permanent case here, folks. Like, the Galactic Starcruiser is going to be no more. Disney had already reached out to guests that had already booked for this experience way beyond September, and is offering them either a full refund or to reschedule before September 28th. To me, this wasn't a shocker. As much as I love Disney, I love them to succeed. This whole concept, even before they even broke ground, I was optimistic, but I had my doubts about this. And then every time that they were trying to push and promote this thing, I was not seeing nothing come out of it. And then the actor with the Goldbergs, and I'm like, what is this? And then watching YouTube videos of vloggers going in, it's like, this is not appealing to me. I'm trying to like it, but I can't. And for the price, I mean, $6,000 for 2 nights. I mean, that's just on top of what you're already spending for a Walt Disney World package.
Yeah, no, exactly. And really, who I feel the worst for is actually Drunk 3PO. He said he might have to end his channel because he's been kind of living off the Starcruiser news for a few years, or a year actually.
It was very, very popular on his channel.
It was. No, yeah. We love Drunk 3PO. He's a rock star. He's a rock star. But no, I mean, like, seriously though, like with this whole thing, here's the thing, like, and a lot of people give David Zaslav a lot of shit, right? Like, every time he cancels a movie like Batgirl or whatever, or does these drastic changes, people kind of get on top of him and like, what are you doing? It's like, you have to understand something, that like, the Hollywood studios are going through a lot of shit right now. And if you're not making big moves to kind of course correct, then you're not doing it right, And that's one of the big things, like, I've been kind of thirsty for Disney to do. I've been really wanting them to really go in there and really just kind of like go balls to the wall, George, and really start to readdress all this stuff. I've even said it recently on an Orange Nerd show we did with Jay, I believe, where it's like, why aren't they going into like, Lucasfilm and like getting a new studio head? Why aren't they really making bold changes? Right now, finally, we're starting to see some bold changes with this. This is the kind of move that we should be making. I get it. It's not a good headline to close this thing after a year and some change, but it's the right headline. It's the right move to make. You have to at some point have to decide, is this thing worth putting good money after bad? Right? Like, so yeah, they could fix it. They could reimagine this experience, and they can pour all kinds of money into it. And then what happens if it doesn't work? Now you're even more in the hole, right? So Bob Iger and Disney, maybe even Daddy Josh made the right decision to say, you know what? We poured enough into this thing. It's not going anywhere. We could pour more money into it, but is it really going to be worth it at the end of the day? I don't think so. And here's the other thing too, real quick before I go to Dre. This could be very, very positive for Galaxy's Edge. And the reason why I say that is because I think Disney withheld a lot of the stuff from Galaxy's Edge because they wanted to funnel you, corral you into the Galactic Starcruiser. One of the big reasons, in my opinion, this is just speculation, OG going to Speculationville, but one of the big reasons why I think we didn't get that big restaurant with the entertainment was because they knew they were going to do that kind of dining experience on the Starcruiser. They'd rather you pay the $6,000 to do the Starcruiser. So why are we going to add something similar in the land? So now that the Starcruiser is out of the way, I think we're going to start to see more and more really cool offerings. Maybe we'll get that dinner show in Galaxy's Edge. Maybe we'll get no more timeline in Galaxy's Edge because now it's not fucking tied to this stupid Starcruiser.
And I want the Banthas. I really want the Banthas. I don't know if we're going to get them, but I really want them. If they were going to put so much money into this freaking thing, just put it into the Banthas. I want to be able to go in there and I want to smell shit. Like I want to see flies going all around. I want to see all that. I want to see all that grime, that dirt, that everything that is part of Star Wars. I don't want to see this clean cut bullshit. Like
can we get like the Imagineering smell scientists to really get in there and get us some real authentic Banta shit smells in the land, please? Not kidding. Dre, what are your thoughts on this, sir? Sorry, we're going way off the rails.
Yep.
There you go.
That is one big pile of shit.
There you go. And
yes, folks, we only have high-class stuff on this show.
Okay. All right. Wasn't expecting that, but all right. Okay. I wanted to go ahead and hit this statement right here, and then I'll get into what I'm going to say here. Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser, this was the statement put out by Disney. I believe Jeff Vail put this out, if I'm not mistaken. That's what I was hearing, but say Levy, Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser is one of our most creative products ever, and has been praised by our guests and recognized for setting a new bar for innovation and immersive entertainment. That's one way of putting it. This premium experience gave us the opportunity to try new things on a smaller scale of 100 rooms, and we will take what we've learned to create future experiences that can reach more of our guests and fans. We will be contacting guests who booked for voyages on or after September 30th to discuss their options and modifying their plans. To prioritize these guests, we are pausing new bookings until May 26th. We are so proud of all of the cast members and Imagineers who brought Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser into life and look forward to delivering an excellent experience for guests during the remaining voyages over the coming months. So they're trying to say, well, this was just a test, guys. Just a test. A small thing, 100 rooms. No biggie. It's all good. Now, I will say some of the media weren't necessarily having that. You don't invite all the press down there and all of the vloggers that they did and so forth to try to showcase this thing if it was just a test.
No,
Tests happen in Glendale, not on large scales, things like this.
Yeah.
It was 100 rooms, and just like, I didn't quite predict this, but I did predict maybe after about a year they might have to rethink this concept a little bit. Now, I didn't think that they were going to fully cancel this thing outright. I didn't anticipate that. But I'll say this, there's a saying that says there are no bad products, just bad price points. And I think this is really what kind of caught this thing up in the end. Now, the quality of experience, very subjective, right? But I think the quality of the amenities and so forth that, were shared with that kind of upfront price, $6,000 for 2 days or, whatever the pricing actually was, it was just a little bit too high for what people perceived that they were getting. Now, some people who did experience it changed in that view and said, oh, this is totally worth it or whatever, but that sticker shock combined with how the rooms looked, for example, or what the food looked like, or what the quality of experiences that, could be displayed on camera just didn't quite match up with that price point. And I think that really did hurt it. The poor advertising campaign that happened really kind of set this thing back for sure. Yeah. It had to be made up in the experience. And unfortunately, that just did not translate, I think, to the extent that Disney was looking for, that it mounted in bookings consistently. But go ahead, George.
Well,
you want to say something?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
go
I was just going to say I agree with you of that. I think the initial price point when someone looks at that amount, you expect like top notch, and you're going to look at the nitty gritty details. And it's like if something is not up to par, it's like, well, I just put out $6,000 for this thing. It's supposed to be like the creme de la creme. It's like if I'm going to pay $500 for a smoking drink with whatever the hell that thing is, I better be pissing out liquefied gold after I digest that thing.
Well, the thing with the issue with the Starcruiser was that on paper, it's actually a pretty creative and clever idea. I actually, and I might get some shit for this, but like I honestly do believe that like this idea of like a galactic cruise liner, I think it's actually a really solid idea.
I don't mind if you get shit for this, OG, as long as it's Bantha shit.
Right, exactly. But I think the problem is that once they got into the details, right, the devil's in the details, and once they started to price this thing like an actual cruise, where you're not going to Cabo, you're not going to the Bahamas, you're in this like bunker for 3 days, like you're not going anywhere. So you're pricing it like a cruise line, but you're not getting what you get with a cruise line. That, like George said, the price point is a big factor. If you were to price this thing like a Grand Floridian or a Grand Californian, a high-end Disney hotel, it would probably still be here. It would probably still be, I think it would have done much better. It just, you can't charge cruise line prices, and it's not even, you're not going really anywhere.
Well, you even mentioned about pricing it like the Grand Californian or the Grand Floridian or like one of the deluxe hotels. And a lot of people are saying now, oh, they should just transform it into a Star Wars themed hotel. But with the amount of rooms, I don't know how that could actually be as just a typical regular hotel. They would still have to expand something on it, or I would even say, and I'm probably going to get the Bantha shit for this, is demolish the whole entire thing or keep it as like a show building and just expand it out to Galaxy's Edge.
I think Braden put it really nicely. And this is kind of something I was saying before, but to people who would be inquiring about the possibility of transforming this into a hotel that could be used, it's like it's very purpose built for being a Starcruiser. You know, the 100 rooms are situated in such a way that it mirrors a real ship. There are no windows, there is no pool, there is no spa. You know, it's missing a lot of those kind of signature Disney amenities that it would, I think, necessitate if you were to transform this into a hotel. And I think for the company itself, I think it's just not worth it. Now, what's interesting here is that people are saying that this thing costs upwards of $1 billion, $2 billion.
No, dude.
Guys,
no, dude.
Stop with this narrative. I think people are kind of getting their let's say their streams crossed here, because I think you have some articles publishing the fact that Star Wars Galaxy's Edge was $1 billion, and that is very, very accurate. But think about what you're getting for that, you know, a $1 billion exercise, right, on each coast. You're getting hand carved rockwork thing, you know, that goes to 130 plus feet high, right? You're getting state-of-the-art ride systems. In fact, the Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run, it contains, I think, like 240 Quadro GPUs at $8,000 a piece. You have, custom everything in that land when it comes to the buildings, architecture, furniture, everything like that, right? That's what you get for $1 billion, not basically a windowless prison on the outside. And on the inside, kind of on the cheap. And I think that's what kind of doomed this here, because I think the cheap came out expensive, just like Harmonious, or in a very similar way of Harmonious, right? Where they didn't have that dried up.
DCA 1.0, the cheap came out expensive. You end up having to redo it again for $1 billion again. It's not worth it, right?
Exactly. No, you're 100%. Just like DCA 1.0, where they didn't shell out the cash for the actual theme park itself at first, they really kind of, it really kind of held the revenue generating opportunities in that theme park back for so long. Meanwhile, you had the Grand Californian right next door, which they did spend money on, and that was raking the dough no matter what. So it just kind of goes to show you, if you invest, I think people will come, or at least it makes it an easier buy-in for this Galactic Starcruiser. When you see that price of $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, and you see those kind of accommodations, like I said during our initial review of some of the rooms back on this channel, I was saying Yeah, but I can't hang my hat on that as a consumer. I can't, how can I justify that price when I'm getting those kind of things? Now, listen, there is an overhead that you have to fulfill, right? Before you do reach profitability because of those equity actors and some of the interactive experiences that you're experiencing inside. And I think that's why it was like, well, discounting, it's kind of a short-term solution. Yeah, you get people in the door, but you don't. There is a point at which you don't make money unless you charge a certain figure. I think if they would have invested more in some of those amenities, let's say you were staying, in like a temple, right? That was a very unique location, very Star Wars centric, and actually had some quality to it, could you imagine if you were staying in the queue of, the Temple of the Forbidden Eye? That'd be interesting, right?
Right.
That's, I think, the kind of quality level that was really required in order to shell out that kind of cash. And I think that they missed the boat on that.
Yeah, and the amount of money that yeah, you're absolutely right, Dre. And the amount of money that it would cost to even turn this thing into like a regular hotel.
You got fallacy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you got to understand the entire exterior of this thing is not themed. So what do you do with that? If you repurpose it, you got to address that,
Yeah. Not to mention even how they allowed guests to even approach this thing. I mean, like if you were driving, if you were a local and you were taking your own car and you see the back of Galaxy's Edge with the top of the spire lollipop sticks is what I like to call them.
That was not the best entrance experience. For sure.
It's like, so the whole thing of how, I don't know how that they missed the mark of like looking at like force perspective and like ways to kind of, it just seemed like it was just thrown together just for a cash grab. And I think because they had that mentality, that's where the execution and the creativity lacked.
It's interesting because the best analogous version of this that you can point to in the marketplace right now is probably Omega Mart in Vegas, and that is priced very differently. I think for the experience, it's like $45 or something, and you don't necessarily spend overnight. But it's been doing gangbusters business. There is, I think, a business to be had from very interactive experiences like this, and then wrapping it in a kind of a hotel kind of concept. Like I said, OG, I mean, could you imagine maybe staying at Hogwarts and trying to become a wizard and so forth, and staying in one of those gorgeous rooms? And even at that same price point, I think would have been much more successful. This just wasn't the most successful implementation of this idea, I got to be honest, and that's really sad because I think it was ambitious. I think it was different for Disney. They just couldn't capitalize on it. And to your point, OG, if you want to share my screen here real fast, Disney was looking into maybe possibly redesigning this. It's interesting. According to Tom Corliss over there at Walt Disney World News today, they're saying this: Disney Imagineers were actively working on new shows, merchandise, and updates for Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser, was set to close December 2023. So it looks like they were kind of maybe looking at the possibility of injecting new life into the Star Cruiser. The question is how much, how far? Wouldn't have really made a difference. And like, kind of Iger said, right, when he was talking on the earnings call, talking about, let's say, international markets that they were opening up their DTC product to, and then marketing to said market. He was saying, look, if we're not ever going to get the revenue out of this to make that venture profitable, why do it? And I think that the same calculation was made here. Now that Iger has been in the seat for a little while, now that, you can get one over on DeSantis by pulling out of Florida, I think all of those things combined is why they announced this at this time. I think there were problems long term with this, and from what I understand, this was more Chapek's baby than it was Iger. For Iger, it's like it's probably not worth it.
And there's been a lot of dispute about that. I'm glad you brought that up, Dre. I was actually going to bring that up. I'm glad you brought it up.
Sure.
There's been kind of like opposing narratives here that this was Bob Iger's thing or Bob Chapek's thing. Now, I've heard long before this announcement, I've heard this was a Bob Chapek baby. When he was the park chief, he was really kind of pushing this hotel concept, and then it obviously bled into his time as CEO. Now, look, there's no doubt about it. When Chapek was running the parks, Bob Iger was CEO. But that doesn't change the fact that this was a Bob Chapek spearheaded project when he ran the parks. And now it opened when he was CEO, but it was still spearheaded and really pushed for when he was that parks chief in 2019. And look, I'm not in the room with a lot of this stuff, but just from what I've heard over the past couple of years, this was a Chapek thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Iger might have signed off on it, obviously, in 2019 when they made that announcement at D23. But at the end of the day, I think this is really his kind of baby. But what do you guys think about this? I mean, I see that some people are saying, like, you know, this is an Iger thing. This isn't really a Chapek thing.
I mean, I do feel like it was Chapek in my own personal opinion, because correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't during the time of the pandy with the shutdown when projects were either on hold or moving forward or canceled altogether, everything, all the funds, all the construction workers, all the Imagineers kind of were abandoning other projects to move over to the Galactic Starcruiser because they were really pushing this thing to get done. And that's essentially what delayed Tron for X amount of time. The Mary Poppins attraction, which turns out it was just an indoor spinning teacup, which I couldn't really care less, but just the notion of that was essentially put on hold and then canceled altogether. So wasn't it the sense that they were really banking on this once Chapek became CEO, that this was going to be bigger and better than even thinking about any kind of just a simple ride or attraction in one of the theme parks?
It seems like they definitely were making moves, moving things around to make sure this thing happened. And like, that's why I think it definitely does point to Chapek, it being his kind of like his love child or project, whatever. Go ahead, Ray. I do apologize, sir.
I think, well, no, you're fine. I think there's evidence to suggest that this was a Chapek era kind of, well, I mean, obviously it was a Chapek era initiative, but motivated by Chapek specifically. I think there's evidence to point to that in the sense that, one, Chapek was very proud of the fact that this was going to be a new innovative experience for the Parks and Resorts division, so much so that there were supposed to be a Star Wars Galaxy's Edge in every single theme park around the world.
I mean, a Starcruiser?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser, this kind of Star Wars hotel concept. There was supposed to be one of those attached to every single main resort. That includes Tokyo, especially Paris, and so forth. So I think Chapek really wanted this to work out because the potential revenue model going forward was absolutely there, and I do agree with that. The second thing that we can kind of point to Chapek in this is Chapek is cited very largely as the reason why Star Wars Galaxy's Edge didn't get the interactive features and the kind of placemaking, let's say, that land was supposed to have. The Wandering Droids, for example, the Legends of Frontierland type game that was supposed to be there, the music players, live entertainment acts, the stunt shows, and so forth. All of that was placed behind a paywall in the form of the Galactic Starcruiser. What does that sound like to you? It sounds kind of like a Chapek move, right? And he probably did it under the auspices that we would eventually bring those things to a Disney theme park, but it would be in the hotel specifically.
Which, to the Galactic Starcruiser's credit, you know, some of those costumes and characters are very authentic. They're very lifelike. I would love to just see them transitioning them into Galaxy's Edge because the land needs it. Yeah. And I think that's where it would help in the better. I really do.
Well, you're right, George. And Dre, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, like, what would be the incentive from Disney or Chapek to add that dinner theater show in Galaxy's Edge if we're going to build something similar in the Starcruiser where people pay a lot more? Right. So it's not a coincidence, because we've talked about that on this show. Like, why would they cancel the dinner show in Galaxy's Edge? That seems like they're leaving money on the table. But see, from Chapek's perspective, they weren't leaving money on the table because he knew they were going to add a similar thing in the Starcruiser where people were have to spend $6,000 for 2 or 3 nights. So it made sense for them. Now, in hindsight, looking back, it makes sense. At the time, we couldn't figure it out. But they were definitely withholding and even pulling away from Galaxy's Edge to funnel people into this experience. bad decision. And that's why I think that this is actually a very positive move. I mean, definitely Disney is eating a shit sandwich right now for sure. But at the end of the day, though, I do think it will definitely be beneficial to the land itself, because now there's not the Starcruiser there incentivizing Disney to put it in there. You're going to put it in the land.
And let me correct you on that, OG, a Bantha shit sandwich.
Yes. Thank you, George. Thank you, George.
I put up this tweet right here, and I kind of want to encourage some discussion on this point right here.
Sure.
When the Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser closes, it will have operated for 578 days. That's a little bit over a year for those keeping track. Walt Disney World's Harmonious and Enchantment operating for 548 days. Again, these were all things that were supposed to be, 10 years. And so to have them unceremoniously canceled in the way that they have been lately is a little bit of a blow, especially to the people who actually created these experiences, but also to the financial situation to actually earmark these things for creation itself. You're looking at kind of a 10-year scale for those things, and when that doesn't actually materialize, it's unfortunate. Combined, they will likely amount to about $500 million plus. If you want to say that Harmonious was about $200 million, Enchantment, I couldn't imagine it being much more than $10 million. And then we're hearing, the figure that I'm kind of gearing towards when I look at this Galactic Starcruiser, and anywhere between $150 to $250 million. So that's kind of where that $1 billion figure comes from. But how many jobs could have been saved? How many rides could have been built? Imagine what we could have had. Imagine what we lost. And the reason why I picked these specific photos for this is, Radiator Springs Racers, for example, was about $350 million. Rise of the Resistance, I've heard anywhere between 300, 400, something like that for that experience. Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind, we have heard about $450 million for that experience. So when you look at some of these things that have failed, it's really unfortunate, because you just look at that CapEx money and it's like, that could have been applied to so many different things. And maybe it could have saved some jobs during these cuts. Oh, gee, George, what do you think about that?
In hindsight, it's unfortunate to look at, but at the end of the day, I mean, it is kind of hindsight though, because like a lot of studios can go, wow, man, if only we didn't make Cats. Imagine what money that money could have went to a movie that would have been better, Sure. So it is a little hindsight. It's 2020. They didn't know these things weren't going to land, so it seemed like a good investment at the time. But I'm glad that they cut bait when they did. Look, what they could have done is they could have kept Harmonious, and they could have tried to jam that square peg into that round hole and reimagined it and tried a million different ways to get this thing to be popular. And I'm glad they didn't, because at the end of the day, I think that these bargers, the taco and the giant ring and everything, they're hideous. They take away from the aesthetics all day at Epcot. I'm glad they just cut bait, stopped the bleeding, and got rid of it. It's expensive, but I think it's a short-term pain in exchange for a long-term gain. So I think we're okay there. Same with the Starcruiser. It's a short-term pain. Yeah, it sucks closing this thing, right? I mean, all the worst headlines in the world right now going around social media and what have you, that they close this thing. But at the end of the day, I think as fans, we actually gain from it, because now they can spend money on things that might work. Right? We're not pouring money into the money pit anymore. We're going to put that money towards something else. It might be towards something for Disneyland Forward. It might be put something towards Disney World. Who knows? Maybe something for Hollywood Studios, something that will be better received. So yes, I think a lot of these decisions, I think short term really, really suck and hurt the company for sure. These are definite blows, not even financially, but optics wise, huge blows. But at the end of the day, I think that it's better to stop the bleeding than just be like strong and wrong and just keep going, because we don't want to shut it down. We don't want to have a bad headline. I think they made the right call with every one of these by getting rid of them. They weren't working. So why keep funneling money and pretending like they are? I think it's good to kind of stop the bleeding and kind of start the healing process. Go ahead, George.
Yeah, I actually echo your thoughts, OG. I feel that it is a lost cause, unfortunate, and it is a bummer when you look at it in that perspective. And it's like, oh man, of what you showed, Dre, like those 3 hard ticket attractions, it's like, why not could we have not duplicates, but like duplicates of that quality and that kind of attractions, and it's money thrown out. But to OG's point, that I am glad that Disney noticed it and just wasn't in a fantasy land about it, of just saying, oh yeah, it's okay, it'll work. They realized it's not going to work. They took the ding of the financial burden that these projects have cost. But I am glad that it was, if you have a bum leg, you don't get rid of the whole body, you just cut off the leg, so I am glad in that aspect that Disney can, stopped it before it became more detrimental.
Yeah, obviously this is definitely hindsight for sure. And
But it still,
yes,
but it still sucks. Like, I mean, like
still sucks.
it makes you want to shake Disney and say, why couldn't you have seen this beforehand?
Well, that's kind of my thing, right? It's self-inflicted because I think these things could have worked, but you had some very unqualified people, let's say, that were making some of the decisions surrounding some of these experiences. Like the Starcruiser setting that price so high, it's like, come on, guys. Like how do you not focus group test that? Do you not figure out in advance that this thing is not sustainable at that price point? Harmonious, for example, like, to not do that dry dock, to actually have these things go backstage each time. What a devastating decision that costs exponentially in the long run. Yes, it is hindsight, but could decisions have been made to preserve these things for longer? I think so. And I think these things could have worked, and the fact that they did not is really, really, really unfortunate.
And you know what, Trey?
It probably cost us some things that could have worked.
Yeah, no, 100%. And to kind of to kind of hammer home your point a little bit. I mean, you make a good point, especially when it comes to, I'm a little more forgiving with enchantment. That's a very subjective thing. It's a fireworks show. Sure. Hey, it didn't land. Okay, yeah. It happens, right? But with things like Harmonious, you're right. You're absolutely right. They could have put a little more thought into that show. Look at all the thought that went into World of Color, making sure that the platform could rise and sink during the day, and there's maintenance mode and there's show mode, and right, to make sure that aesthetically it was great during the day, and then at night, it can perform, and then they can raise it higher when they want to maintain it. There was a level of care there that they had with that show to make sure it worked on every angle. Now look, we can argue all day if that actually came to be or not, because sometimes it's a little unsightly. Sometimes they have it in maintenance mode during the day. I get that. I understand that. But I think at the end of the day, though, I think at least they made the effort. I think the technology is there where they could lower it and raise it when they want. With Harmonious, they really, for money reasons, cost-cutting reasons, they decided, like you said, Ray, they're going to just be tethered in that spot all the time. And that was a real... I'm telling you, I'm very forgiving with stuff. I can forgive a bad show. Shows, entertainment, very temporary things. They're here today, and in 5 years are gone. I get that, fine. I can deal with a bad show. What I can't deal with is eyesores like this that sit in the lagoon all day long. You're going to have these horrible-looking monstrosities sitting in the lagoon all day long for a 20-minute show at night. You're sacrificing the aesthetics of this park for 20 fucking minutes. Are you kidding me? The most boneheaded decision in the world. That's the kind of stuff that I think that you're absolutely right, Ray. That you have to plan for that going forward before. I get it. Enchantment didn't land, whatever. People don't like it. That's a subjective thing. But these barges and all that, projection screens, there's no excuse for that. They knew what they were doing when they put those in.
Well, and that's kind of going back to what our first topic was about with the Lake Nona move. I mean, maybe that this is actually kind of a connection to that, of what we were saying about if they were to move to Lake Nona with Imagineers, it would be these greenhorn Imagineers, if you will. They come in, they leave, they just get them from different companies. They're not too familiar with how the company is run, where these are the kind of projects and products that you would get if it actually went through. And I think
Right.
all this is kind of tied together with one big decision by Iger himself. And honestly, as we had mentioned earlier, even with Bruce Vaughn, I think the two of them probably sat down, went to lunch, and had a big heart-to-heart discussion of what direction they're going through with WDI and the parks.
Well, that's why you bring on Bruce Vaughn, a guy like Bruce Vaughn with that institutional memory, that experience, so he can come in and sort of tell you what works and what doesn't. That's why you bring a guy like him on. It's not just because he makes great rides, and he does. He's a very talented guy, but he also knows he's not, like you said, like green. He knows that, like, okay, we can't do this because of that, right? We can do this because of this. He understands that. So I think when he came on, it changed the game. I mean, I think that he probably gave, like you said, George, Iger an earful and said, this stuff, you got to change this. This is not working. It is not working.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I think the writing was on the wall really, really early. 6 months, we started seeing some drop off in terms of actual bookings. It's interesting. The Washington Post actually quoted Len Testa, who was a big fan of the Starcruiser, and I guess on his second voyage, by the time that bookings were really dropping off, some of the experiences themselves were actually being hindered by it. We obviously know that there wasn't like a second dinner for some of the nights because attendance was so low, but also too, like, let's say like the bridge experience, right, where you had to defend the ship from the First Order or maybe even asteroids. He was saying that, there were so few people in that experience that there was nobody handling the deflector shields, and somehow we made it out there alive. And it's like, how is that possible? So, it was really designed for 100 rooms, and a lot of this stuff was purpose built for that. It's interesting because originally this was going to be 800 rooms with the ability to expand to 1,200 rooms. And some management looked at it and went, let's see if we can try a smaller version of this first before investing so heavily into this. So 800 became 400, 400 became 200, and 200 became 100. So in that way, it was a little bit of a test. And some of that that press release was actually correct. However, it was never supposed to be a year test. Yeah. It was supposed to test into bigger and better things. So,
well, and technically,
they're pulling back.
Technically, you missed the last wave, Drave, and then it goes from 100 rooms to a Spirit Halloween facility.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I saw that joke a lot. There's been some pretty good, interesting memes and commentary on this. I'll recommend anyone, if they want to look more into this, Penguins Zero, who's a famous streamer and YouTuber. He's got like 1.4 million views on his Galactic Starcruiser video. It's kind of interesting to see kind of a normie's perspective and what they kind of thought about it. But then there's also on the flip on the spectrum, you have Walt Disney World News Today. Tom Corliss just put out a video, I think like with like a 28-minute rant on this whole thing, detailing, what he liked about the experience, how disappointed he is that it was actually going away, and so forth. I think both of those are really kind of an interesting juxtaposition, and I think our viewers could take a lot out of them. So I'd recommend both those videos for sure.
Now, didn't Tom? I didn't watch. Full disclosure, I didn't watch his video, but didn't he say something like that? He actually thought the Starcruiser closing was worse than retheming the Splash Mountain. Did he say that in that video?
Oh, I actually don't know. I haven't listened to the full thing. Unfortunately, I haven't been given the opportunity to do that. I just kind of, skimmed through the first 5 minutes of it.
Yeah.
I mean, he's devastated. He thinks that this is kind of the worst thing that's ever happened to the Disney Parks Experience Products division. This is the worst kind of, failure that Imagineering's ever had, and so forth. I mean, it's a really kind of a profound thing. I want to watch more of it, but unfortunately, I haven't been able to deep dive into it as much as possible. But I think our viewers, will be rewarded for it.
Absolutely. And so I just have to say really quick, I mean, hopefully that these are, not so positive aspects right now, but hopefully eventually in time these decisions can lead into that. And a video that you guys did recently with our friends Casual and Bob, who went to the Disneyland Forward, great video. I got a chance to check it out. I actually was supposed to be part of that, but Comcast kind of did me wrong. And speaking of Comcast, there is going to be a new Minion land opening up at Universal Studios Florida this summer, and it will include the Minion Cafe. Well, I just have to say first off, before we get into anything, that people bash Disney all the time for these heavy IPs in the parks all the time. But I'm sorry, I am so sick and tired of seeing everywhere I go and anything of Universal that has to do with Minions. I don't mind it, a little bit of it, but it is like swallowing everything. And
well, it is. And the thing too, and this is my big issue with this Minions Cafe, is that we see Universal do a lot of great stuff, right? Like when Universal partners with Nintendo, fantastic. When Universal partners with J.K. Rowling to do Harry Potter, fantastic. But Universal doesn't really take that great of care with their own IP. They consistently give us like second and third tier quality stuff when it's Minions or any of their own properties like DreamWorks. It's a lot of this kind of stuff. I'm sorry, this looks very cheap to what Universal has shown us that they're capable of doing. If this was a Wizarding World or a Nintendo thing, it wouldn't look like this. I can tell you that right now, everybody. It would not look like this.
And this replaces the Monsters Cafe, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it did. Correct? Yes, correct.
Right, so they're making kind of a Minion land around one of their Minion attractions right here. Not the worst idea in the world, but like you said, OG, it's all in the execution. And to be honest, I mean, I think you're right. I think with their own IP, you know, when you don't have that kind of motivating presence, like let's say a James Cameron for Terminator or a J.K. Rowling for Harry Potter, or Mrs. Seuss for the Dr. Seuss experience and so forth. When it comes to other people's IP, they really kind of look to make that IP holder happy. But when it comes to their own, they just don't put out the effort, and it's just very strange as to why they don't. This is kind of something I think that will continue to hold them back in this way if they don't keep investing in their signature franchises, which they have a couple of. For example, Jurassic World. Would love to see a better capitalization on that idea. Maybe that kind of darker that they have there in I believe Beijing, if I'm not mistaken, right? Maybe bring that to one of your parks here in Universal Studios Florida or Hollywood. If it's not Harry Potter, if it's not Nintendo, it just seems that they don't really kind of step up to the plate, and that is really unfortunate because that kind of it's a reflection of your brand, it's a reflection of your quality from your Universal creative team.
Well, yeah. Well, Steve Jobs said it best, where he said, "No one is going to take care of your brand like you do." So it's like this is your property, Universal. You own this property. You should go all in, even more so on these because you own it. This is like your thing. You should really go in on it. And unfortunately, they don't. It seems like over and over again, we see kind of half efforts when it comes to Minions or DreamWorks or these various properties. So I would like to see them step it up a little bit. This, to me, looks very cheap. Now, I will say, to give credit to them, while I don't like the design work and the kind of cheapness of the aesthetics, the food offerings are like out of this world great. They look fantastic, like really, really good. There you go. Yeah, up here, like very cute. Like well, that one's not very themed. I thought there was more than that. well, okay, they tried. No, I thought they had didn't they have Minion shaped chicken?
OG, I'm sorry. I'd rather take my chance with the Bantha shit.
Yeah, I could have sworn they had Minion. There you go. I could have sworn they had Minion shaped chicken nuggets. I think they do. I've seen those on my timeline. But yeah, overall though, I'm just not impressed. And I just wish that Universal would take their own properties a lot more seriously than they do.
Well, and especially when they call it DreamWorks or Illuminations, and they kind of did this with Shrek, and I feel like that's where Shrek kind of got became diminished in a sense because it was like titling it as overall DreamWorks, but they only had Shrek. And now they're kind of doing the same thing with like Illuminations. It's like, okay, Illuminations, and it's just Minions and Despicable Me. I mean, there's still so many films that did well at the box office that I think is still relevant to today's time. I mean, you take the films from Sing. You know, they could have easily done something like sort of like how they did the Laugh Floor Comedy Club at Tomorrowland at Magic Kingdom, where you can kind of have guests interacting with the characters, and maybe you do like a karaoke type of interaction with the characters or something creative in that nature. It just seems like anytime that they're relying on, oh yeah, let's do something with Illuminations. Oh yeah, let's just go back to the Despicable Me and Minions brand, which I get it. It's very popular. People buy into it. But again, I just feel like they're just throwing it in our face, and it's very, very, it's not discreet. I'll say that.
Well, one of the things that I was kind of discouraged about learning with Epic Universe was the How to Train Your Dragon boat ride is going to be, I'll share my screen real quick, basically kind of like what Legoland has with this kind of like this, you're in a boat and you're squirting at targets and stuff. And it's like, and this is honestly, Disney's guilty of this too. I mean, full disclosure, this is Web Slingers, the Ninjago thing. I mean, that was a Legoland kind of ride. It's very cheap. Again, it's their own property. Like, you think J.K. Rowling would have put up with this shit? Let's be honest.
No
way.
Absolutely not.
There's no freaking way, dude.
So being that you actually brought that up, and that's why I feel like Disney isn't really too worried about Epic Universe in that sense, because when you look at it as a whole, it's like, yes, we're getting a whole entire great theme park, which I'm for sure it's still going to be great. It's going to be popular. It's going to bring in the money. There's probably going to be some hard e-ticket attractions at this place. But if you look at it, the perspective of what you just showed on the screen, you can say, oh yeah, we're getting a How to Train Your Dragon attraction. Well, automatically you're thinking that it's going to be like a high speed type of hybrid roller coaster where we get to ride on a dragon and all that. No, you're sitting in a damn boat spraying people that's walking along the paths. It's like, what's the correlation of that?
Well, to be fair, I think they are building there is a coaster in that land. Is that correct, Ray? There is a coaster. I think. Yeah. So to be fair, there is.
The land is kind of is directed towards little ones, and so it's like, okay, what experiences?
I don't give a care about that shit.
Well,
it's like,
I'm just saying. I mean, you need like a Fantasyland type land in which to kind
But at least the Fantasyland dark rides at Disneyland are charming. Like, these kind of things are like they're eyesores. Like it's nothing appealing to it.
Let's see what the final implementation is before going off of 3D design concept for another park. I mean, look, Gadget's Go Coaster, that was an off-the-shelf coaster, right? And they themed it to the 9 when they did, and now it's very, very charming. Let's just see. Let's hold back the criticism a little bit. I do agree with you. I would much rather see state-of-the-art ride systems and brand new tech and all these kind of custom-built things. But for the demographic that will be
but now let me
I can understand the decision.
But let me ask you fellas this. For the How to Train Your Dragon coaster, is it just going to be like a regular coaster that's just going to be named after How to Train Your Dragon, or is it going to be heavily themed? Because there is such a thing that if you take something like the Incredicoaster, yeah, it has the Incredibles tied to it, but at the end of the day, it's just another roller coaster.
I don't know what the extent of the theming is. I think there will be some bear track portions, but I also think there will be some heavily themed portions as well. The land actually looks pretty good in various aspects. We'll see, though. I mean, I do agree with you, George. There is maybe a lack of theming on some of
and
these
and I
things
do
going on.
apologize for my bash towards this, but I'm
you're
not
fine.
I'm not in good contact with Comcast right now. So
That's true.
But yeah, no, that's fair. But here's the other thing too, though, is that they're setting. Well, maybe not even Universal, to be fair. Maybe it's a fandom, but there's an expectation out there right now that this thing is going to change the game. This thing is going to destroy the Walt Disney Company. That's the expectation right now. That this Epic Universe is supposed. It is, but that's reality on Twitter. I mean, that's what I was saying.
That's what I was saying. When you look at it as a whole, it's an Epic Universe, a brand new theme park. But when you kind of break each individual attraction down, is it really going to live up to the expectations of what Disney has?
Well, because yes, the narrative out there on social media is Disney needs to respond to this thing. This is an incredible. So that's why when I see stuff like the Legoland Squirt ride, I'm like, wait a minute. Like, this is supposed to be the thing that takes the Walt Disney Company down, I thought, fandom. Like, now we're talking, I mean, and it could, but I don't know.
Is it any worse than a raft ride? Off the shelf, right? Like how River Rapids was when Animal Kingdom first opened? Or
no,
some
but
of the lackluster experiences that were part of that park?
No, but Animal Kingdom wasn't billed as like this end-all be-all park, though. This is billed as like the thing that's going to change the industry. Oh, Disney is shaking in their boots, and that's why when you go into this with that expectation and then you see, okay, they're the Legoland Squirt thing, it just doesn't correlate to me. I don't know.
Expectations are
very high. I think it's overly very high,
well,
and I think
it's the first
done.
theme park that has been built in the modern era. We've never had a theme park built domestically within the age of social media on this scale.
That is true,
with this kind of investment.
Because the last one was Islands of Adventure, I believe, in 1999, right after just trailing off of Animal Kingdom.
Right. So. I do agree for various reasons. There are definitely expectations on this, and it's interesting to hear reports that maybe even Universal Creative staff are a little bit disgruntled about the state of Epic Universe and what they're actually building down there, and kind of complaining about the fact that this isn't maybe as epic as has been touted. It's going to be very interesting to see if they can actually rise to the occasion and people will actually go, especially in an economic climate that will have that will contain headwinds. So it is very, very interesting. I don't want to necessarily poo-poo on this stuff too much, though, because sometimes you just never know, right?
Dre, come on. We've been through this, brother. It's Bantha poo-poo.
You're right.
That's true. There are some things. Look, Star Wars Galaxy's Edge was touted to be the most mind-blowing thing ever. And now we have this Galactic Starcruiser closing, which was very heavily integrated with this whole thing, and now everybody says Star Wars Galaxy's Edge needs a redo, right? Toontown was looked at to be a little modest overlay, and it was one of the things that was touted on the earnings call. You just never know when these things are going to pop up.
It's like a lightning in a bottle. It really can either strike gold or strike Bantha, so it can go either way.
But that's what I love about, because a lot of people in the fandom, they're not having this conversation about Epic Universe. Nobody wants to discuss this. Everyone wants to just say this thing is not a automatic home run. And I like the fact that we're at least questioning stuff because we are hearing murmurs. We have a source that we call Dude Trust Me Bro is saying that there is issues within Universal Creative. There have been issues within Epic Universe. We're hearing it from Mice Chat and what have you. You have to remember too, and I don't even blame Universal for this, but the park was built during the lockdowns and the pandemic with the supply chain shortages and inflation. It's not like I wouldn't even blame them if there were to be cuts to be made, and probably there were cuts made along the way. It would be expected of a company to do that when you're paying way more for steel and all these other supplies than you would have normally.
Right.
So there's going to be cuts here and there, and it kind of jives with what we're hearing from various sources. And
it's very similar to what happened with Disney, right? Where they had to make cuts to the product, let's say for the Galactic Starcruiser or even Harmonious, when they were forced to as a result of the pandemic. Does that impact the product, Epic Universe, to the point where maybe these things are looked at not so in a keen light in the next year or so that they are when they were hyped up during the development and construction process. It's going to be really interesting to see whether or not Universal can buck that trend of cuts made pandemic era, these things open and are perceived differently.
Well, and our friend Disney Glimpses was saying that like it's not wise to build a third park when you have one park that's a half-day park with Universal Studios, because Disney learned that lesson when they built Animal Kingdom. You had a couple half-day parks in Florida, and they suffered when Animal Kingdom came on board. There was a lot of cannibalization. That's a fair point to make, and we made that point many times here on the channel, where it's like, okay, you're building a third park, that's fantastic, but you have Universal Studios proper in Florida, that's a half-day experience, so that's going to impact, I think. You don't have 2 full day parks right now. You have a day and a half kind of, and then now you're going to add another park. What does that do to the half day park? That's a big question mark.
Well, that's even the fandom that was saying, oh, we're now finally going to get a 5th gate at Walt Disney World, because Iger had mentioned about a $17 billion investment. And it's like, if you really think of it, a 5th park, a 5th gate, we don't have even enough in the other ones, let alone bring on another one. And it's like, as you mentioned, OG, it's just going to keep cannibalizing. It's like you have to get more into the parks you already have before taking on another gate.
That's why they haven't built another park since Animal Kingdom, I think, is because they saw that cannibalization and they're like, it didn't work. We have to flesh these other ones out first. And I think that's why it's been so long. And that's why I don't think that we're going to see a 5th park at Disney World for a very long time. I still hold on to my prediction that Disneyland will get a 3rd gate before Disney World.
I agree with you with that. I would put my money with a 3rd gate at Disneyland over Walt Disney World. I think in the social
media era and the reservation era, I think those are different things than maybe parks experienced in the 1990s. I think I think that whole dynamic might have changed. But we will definitely see, because social media has been a boon to these parks ever since it was introduced. Will that translate with new offerings domestically, and will that translate to new days and a cannibalization of not just your own parks but of other parks surrounding it from other companies? We will see, because that's a developing story for sure. But
absolutely. And really quick, I just have to say, as OG had mentioned, a lot of people don't discuss it, of what we're discussing, but we do it here on OG 55. So definitely you have to check us out. You gotta smash that like button. You gotta subscribe. You just gotta listen to all this juicy but sometimes sticky Disney news and info.
I want to ask you guys one more thing. Speaking of juicy and sticky, now this is going to be a controversial topic, but sometimes, like you said, George, sometimes these things have to be talked about. There's a lot of talk, like in the community, like pixie dusters and shills. If you defend Disney, a lot of shill stuff out there. You guys have all heard it, YouTube, Twitter, all that stuff, right? And that's fine. I'm not denying there's definitely pixie dusters and shills out there. I'm not even saying there's not. But when it comes to Universal, though, I see a lot of white knighting and defending for Universal. A lot. I see people come out of the woodwork to defend this company over everything, but I don't see anyone calling people Universal shills. It's not the same. You just don't see it. Like, George, what do you think? And then I'll go to Dre. Like, what are your thoughts on, like, why can you be a shill for Comcast Universal, but you can't be a shill for Disney? Why is that?
Yeah, I honestly feel like people just make up their own roles, and I think it just kind of it dwindled down to the fact that with Disney, people look at this company of how it was founded and where it has come from, and the history behind this company and how much is so connected to it with the studio and the parks and television and now the streaming service. It's like everything, someone has an opinion on something of it or another, and it's almost like Disney was always put up to the top tier, the creme de la creme, the cherry on the top, the icing on the cake for many, many years. And I feel that with that expectation, people then started to nitpick every little thing, especially when social media came about. So it's like it gave them a platform to release their frustration, saying, oh, I thought Disney was supposed to be this top-notch big brand company, this mega corporation. Oh, but look at this. There's some paint chipping over here, or that light fixture is a little bit loose over there. And it just snowballed into this big thing where it's like, no matter what Disney would do, whether it's for the good or the bad, there's going to be people out there that that will find a negativity in it. Now, as far as with Universal, I don't feel that Universal had that kind of long length capability that Disney has had to kind of sustain those type of pedestal type qualities. And I feel like in time, especially since now Universal is starting to grow and starting to become a front runner with Disney, it wouldn't surprise me down the road that we would start seeing some Universal shills.
Interesting.
Yeah, well, I think the Universal shills come from this mentality. I think you're right, George. There's this kind of mentality around, or this thought process around Disney, and how there's a certain, level of expectation when it comes to quality, especially for the price paid and so forth, especially with people's memories of how that product was and what it's developed into now and so forth. And you have some people that are disgruntled, combined with the fact that there's this kind of underdog mentality when supporting Universal, right? People see it as kind of the scrappy theme park company that can, even though it's part of Comcast, which is one of the largest corporations on the planet. But because it is in second place in their theme park division, people look at it differently than they do Disney. Disney, because they set the tone when it comes to the entire industry, and because they're number one, there's a different level of expectation and standard of quality, as opposed to Comcast, which it sits comfortably in number two, right? And I say comfortably because it doesn't have that same
Sure.
kind of scrutiny that George alluded to, and you have people actively rooting for it because it is the underdog in this situation.
Do
And
you
it's like
think,
if you're at the top, you can't go anywhere but down. And
True.
it's
Right.
like that's
right?
What
Well,
do you think, OG?
Well, I was gonna ask you guys, and Dre makes a great point here. It's sitting comfortably at number two. Do you think Universal wants to be like? Is it possible? Because we assumed Universal wants to overtake Disney. Do you think maybe Universal wants to be number two because they can fly into that rate? They're making their money, boo. They're still making
yeah.
money. But if they stay number two, they don't got to deal with the drama though. But they're still making money.
I think of all the hell and the criticism and everything that the Walt Disney Company is going through right now. I think Universal is safely where they want to be, not where they have to be. I think that's where they want to be. And it's like, as you had mentioned, they're still bringing in the cash flow. They're staying out of the spotlight. They're staying out of the drama.
Yeah.
And I think that's where they are. That's where they kind of even add fuel to the fire when they add their little tweets, their little jabs at Disney, because it's like, oh, you're at the top, we're number two, but hey, look who's getting the jabs here. It's you, not us. So I don't know if Universal wants to take that. They still want to proceed and grow in that competition sense, but as far as claiming that number one spot, I don't know about that.
I think they do want to. I think they do want to be number one in a few key metrics. One of those being revenue, one of those being visitation, and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they're okay. I think they're okay not being placed in that number one spot, kind of universally.
No pun intended.
Yeah.
No pun intended,
right?
But can they accomplish the revenue and all those goals without being seen as
I think they
an
can.
actual number one?
I think they can. Yeah. I think they can. I think they, I think they're the business model for Universal right now is pretty. I mean, it's an enviable position to be in. This is why Disney has tried to gear itself towards a more Universal creative type mindset, right? Where it comes to keeping costs down or contained at least, right? When you have greener people at a cheaper price, or maybe even experienced people at a cheaper price, you can get better work for less. And there's a whole bunch of things that go along with it, but I think Universal definitely has the potential to be a really powerful player in this game, that even though we might think of it as number two, they're actually doing very, very well considering their overhead and the revenue generated and so forth. So I think they're okay with where they're at. They definitely have said before, like there was a big poster in the back in kind of this backstage area, Universal, not too long ago. We are we can be number one, or we are trying to be number one. So there's definitely that mentality when it comes to customer service, quality of experience, accommodation, all of that. But I I think, they do benefit greatly
do.
from being number 2, and I think they know that.
100%. Now, real quick, before we move on to our next topic, George, I just want to say that I am not a shill, but go ahead and buy Bob Iger's book, Ride of a Lifetime, $27, Random House, you guys. Okay, a real. No, I'm kidding. I'm just kidding.
Yes.
There we go.
There we go. Had to get a little jam in there.
There you go. There you go. Go ahead, George.
Okay, so we're gonna end this show with a final topic. I'm gonna actually pass it down to Mr. VashSky, because this is going to be something not necessarily for Citrus Corner. It's on a Citrus Corner show, but this is going to be more of an orange nerd type topic. So I'm going to pass it on to you, Mr. Vash.
Please, I do appreciate that. Oh, good sir. While at the same time that news of Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser was actually ending there, at the same time, Kathleen Kennedy and Bob Iger, interestingly enough, at his first Cannes Film Festival, were actually attending the screening at said festival of Indiana Jones 5. It's very kind of interesting. There have been some others in our space that are kind of pointing this out, but I kind of wanted to reiterate here to you guys that they would announce while Kathleen Kennedy is enjoying herself at this momentous event for this film, that Galactic Starcruiser was closing, which has largely been seen as kind of a Lucasfilm product, right? And that there are a range of cuts that are going to be made to Disney Plus in terms of content, and one of those actually includes Willow. So while she was actually sitting there with this screening, and before she actually comes out and faces these questions about these items, these things pop off, and we're hearing that she wasn't made previously aware that these things would actually happen, and especially at this time. I think it's very, very interesting. And well, you have a triple whammy going on here because, well, the reviews coming out of the Cannes Film Festival for Indiana Jones 5 have been middling at best. I mean, they've been kind of all over the place, where you have people who say, who have reacted positively to the film, but with some caveats and some qualifiers, and some people who have absolutely seemingly hated the film. If we take a look at this one right here from Variety, Indiana Jones 5 gets lukewarm 5-minute Cannes ovation as Harrison Ford says an emotional goodbye. And this kind of details that Harrison Ford was, in fact, very emotional at this, that there was this kind of post-credit applause that actually occurred, and he got teary-eyed, which is nice to see, but they have some caveats attached to this, which is very interesting. It says, yes, the applause lasted for 5 minutes, but by Cannes standards, that's more of a polite formality. So apparently, this is something that they do every single time that a theatrical production makes it to this point. It also says here, indeed, the standing ovations for Ford were louder before the movie played. The film's elaborate action scenes and witty one-liners delivered by Waller-Bridge received less than rapturous response inside the theater during parts of the 142-minute film. Audience members could be heard whispering out of boredom in French. That was a pretty scathing kind of article right there, and I guess there is more. Deadline, however much action swirls on the surface of this kind of film, its foundations are built of reassuring nostalgia. Just hearing John Williams' score, yet another variant of the heroics and theatrics of this original, makes anyone of a certain age feel that everything is momentarily right with the world. Not necessarily a glowing review, but positive, like I said. The iconic archaeologist's swan song is a little safe, but it's an enjoyable old-school action adventure with more weight than Cream of the Crystal Skull. If we're comparing it to that film, maybe not good. The Irish Times, though, they just took off. They took off all of the inhibitors right here for this one. Nobody with a brain in their heads will compare Dial of Destiny favorable to the first 3 films. There is a sense throughout of a project struggling to stand beneath the weight of its history. And if you actually go into that review right there by the Irish Times, it's real bad. real bad. I believe right now, OG, could you look it up real fast? What the Rotten Tomatoes score is for this?
I got that. One moment. It is, let's see here. Let's check out that Tomatoes score.
And that was the issue with this film. This was either going to be a make or break. Is like it could have been done really, really well or really, really bad. There was no going middle ground for this.
Well, right now it's sitting at 50.
And how many reviews?
30.
30.
Now,
okay.
I do want to say this. I'm not encouraged by this in any way. Look, I'm a huge Indiana Jones fan. I'm not going to sit here and tell everybody, oh, this is fine. It's not fine. It's not fine. But I do want to provide a little bit of nuance here because there is a little bit of narrative driving out there on social media and stuff. When Super Mario Brothers premiered, with the critic score, which is the same as we're looking at here with Indiana Jones, at like 40-something%, the narrative on Twitter and social media was critics don't know what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. Now, the minute this movie hit 45, 50, suddenly the critics know what they're talking about. Before it was a big conspiracy that these critics don't like Mario because it's not woke. What does that mean? They don't like Indiana Jones because it's not woke? I guess this movie is not woke, apparently. So I just want to say that because I do think that's a huge factor in all of this. But now with that all behind me, this is not a good score. Like we can't pretend, we can't sugarcoat this and say, yeah, you know what? This is fine, you guys. Don't even sweat it. I'm worried. I am extremely worried about this movie.
To provide more nuance with that, a lot of people felt that critics were maybe over-analyzing Mario and that it wasn't that necessarily deep. And I do think that is true. There was no level of depth there for sure, which I think held it back for the critics specifically. But some of these arguments coming out of the critics for this film seem to be maybe a little bit more justified, if only because they're reacting to things that other audiences are seeing when it comes to trailers and some other promotional material for this film. For example, a lot has been said about the CGI and the quality of it, and in these reviews, they're very much like, yeah, you can tell that these things were filmed on sound stages. Yes, you can, the palpable action that was part of the first, original 3 is not present here, specifically because you can tell the tracking's not great, or the backgrounds don't necessarily mesh well with the visuals in the foreground and so forth, right? It kind of takes you out of that experience. They say that the dialogue is a little bit clunky in some areas, which we kind of have seen a little bit in the kind of promotional materials and so forth. So it's interesting, the justification for these things. I think this is a little bit more justified. Look, that being said, though, it's really going to come down to the normies and what they feel. So let's go ahead and wait on that. Mm-hmm. The issue, though, is this film at this expense, anywhere between $300 million, even more than that, really had to benefit from domestic audiences seeing it multiple times. And with these reviews, I don't know if that's a thing right now, because at least with Super Mario Brothers, even if the critics didn't like it, you still knew that it was going to get massive response because, well, there had been really no true Mario Brothers movie until that point, and people were kind of hungry for it, right? Whereas Indiana Jones, you're coming off of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, where people were a little bit maybe disenfranchised with the franchise. Right. And so people kind of had to be convinced to go back in. I just don't know where that convincing argument comes from, if it's, even if the critics aren't kind of persuaded by it.
Yeah, no, it's an issue for this movie for sure. It's an issue for this movie for sure. I mean, you have to, like you said, Dre, this movie has like a massive budget. This movie has to get people into the theater, not once, but twice even. It has to get people excited. And look, I have no doubt the opening weekend will be pretty solid because it's Indiana Jones, right? But if we have weekend number 2 and it falls off like 70%, this movie's in big trouble, dude. It's in big trouble.
It has to sustain leg life. It can't just be. It just can't be based off of opening weekend, because opening weekend could either be a massive success and it continues that trend, or it can be a blunder by week 2 or 3, or it actually may sustain like Avatar, where it's like one big clump in the beginning and then it just kind of steadies out, but it still maintains money.
I'm rooting for this. I'm rooting for this movie because I love Indiana Jones. But I don't think there's any chance it's going to do an Avatar like a leg out. It's not going to leg out. I don't think it's going to leg out like Avatar. I really don't, because I just think that this movie, I don't know, the review. I mean, I get it. The critics are, look, the Cannes Film Festival is like the Oscars. Okay, these people don't like Hollywood summer films. They don't. They didn't.
Right.
You put the same crowd in front of Endgame, and they're not going to like it. They're not going to like it. This isn't the same crowd. But at the end of the day, though, oh man, these reviews are rough.
The numbers are coming out. I just want to go ahead and provide some context and some additional nuance for this, right? So the numbers are just coming out for Fast 10, which we have said that's like a $340 million film. So somewhat comparable to Indiana Jones 5's budget and marketing spend and all of that. And you can see right here it's earning $319 million in its opening weekend, which is good. But you have to remember that of the bulk of that, I believe $250 million worth, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, gee, maybe you can point out where I'm wrong here. But I believe $250 million worth of that is made internationally. And I don't think, that's kind of the scary thing about this, is I don't think Indiana Jones 5 will benefit from that because, first of all, it's a very unknown franchise to large portions of the world, and second, it doesn't have maybe the bombastic action or the big Hollywood film stars that maybe a Fast 10 does and benefits from for specifically those international markets. So that's kind of what I'm saying. Domestically, it really has to do the big numbers, and I just don't know if that's going to be possible with these kind of critical reviews.
Well, and even if you crush it internationally, like Fast X crushes it internationally, but even crushing it internationally isn't necessarily a 100% win because you only get 25% of the box office in China.
Yep.
So you can make a bajillion
and reduced output from other markets, like 40%, so to speak. Go ahead.
Right. No, exactly. So it's like, you make like the dollar amount sounds high, but that studio isn't getting 100% of that dollar amount,
Yeah.
And
so that
he's not going to do what Fast X is doing overseas. There's no way.
No, I don't see it. I really don't see it. And this is kind of unfortunate too, because, well, our predictions for a week showing, let's say for Little Mermaid in China, looks like to be accurate right here. This comes from Louis Verlaine on Twitter. Meanwhile, in China's box office, ticket pre-sales for Little Mermaid showed no signs of reaction. Disney's live action finished SUN with a scary 13,000 total after 3 days of pre-sales for the whole May 25th to 28th period. Could be the worst opening ever for a Hollywood temple in China. Like I said, I mean, you can kind of predict based on some cultural traditions, let's say, that are maybe different from ours, where things might fall off. I don't think that Indiana Jones will necessarily suffer from the same things, but don't expect a much bigger response than that for various reasons.
Little Mermaid was dead on arrival, and Disney knows that in China. There's a reason why the marketing, and look, I'm not condoning what Disney's doing. I'm just telling the facts, but like there's a reason why Disney changed the marketing materials for Black Panther in China. I'm just going to say that. I think you guys know where I'm going with this.
Yep.
That Little Mermaid was not going to do anything in China. This is not a shock. Actually though, I'm going to say a bold statement right now. And I told Ray this on the phone the other day.
There we go.
Word of mouth has been actually pretty good for Little Mermaid. I know Christian Harloff really liked it. I've been hearing a lot of good positive buzz from that premiere.
And aren't they anticipating like $110 million opening?
It's about the same as what the Aladdin live action did, which ultimately went on to do $1 billion. Not to say Little Mermaid's going to do $1 billion. I'm not saying that, but it's opening in and around the vicinity of that 110, 120 opening weekend. We'll see how it legs out, no pun intended. But that movie has gotten a lot of positive momentum lately. I think when people saw that one, I saw a lot more positive buzz for that, saying this is one of the stronger live action films they've done, yada, yada, yada. That's gained momentum. Plus you have the lovely Halle Bailey doing the promotional tour. You can't lose with her. She's fantastic. Indy, though, is a different story. Indy has me more worried than Little Mermaid because Indy is not getting that good word of mouth like Mermaid has. Indy is very much it's mixed, but it leans way more negative.
Well, and it seems like there was a bigger like promotional tour with the Little Mermaid, opposite of Indiana Jones. I mean, it's still out there, but I mean, I see Halle Bailey on like every talk show. She's on Tamron Hall. She's on, Today Live, and it's like Good Morning America. It's like she's on all these higher end platforms showcasing this film, and you really don't see that too much with Harrison Ford.
They pitched it with the Oscars, right? That was like the only film that they did that with, which was very, very uncouth, let's say, for the Hollywood elite over there for that kind of presentation. You brought up Aladdin, OG, earlier on, and I want to go ahead and highlight this. This was interesting.
Oh yeah, the Mena.
Yeah. So Mena Masad, who I believe, or Masood, who starred as Aladdin in the Aladdin live action remake, said this on Twitter, which I thought was maybe inadvisable. Our film was unique in that audiences went to watch it multiple times. It's the only way we reached the $1 billion mark with our opening. My guess is The Little Mermaid doesn't cross the $1 billion mark, but will undoubtedly get a sequel, which is wouldn't necessarily said that. For sure.
But and where does he get this information? Like okay, let me put it this way. He's saying that Aladdin made it because multiple people went back to the theater multiple times to see that movie, and that's true. He's not wrong, but why is he assuming that's not going to happen here? Like he hasn't.
I think there's a couple things playing out here. One is
and also too, he mentioned about a sequel. Wasn't there supposed to be a sequel to the Aladdin?
That's what I was just about to refer to it there, George. I think there's just two things playing out here. One is the Sour Grapes, that their sequel that they were supposed to get is not happening because, well, Will Smith decided to assault somebody in front of the entire world at the not this last Oscars, but the last Oscars. So that film is just dead in the water as it's just not going forward. So I think there's a little bit of that. And two, I think there might be some racial things going on here, and how maybe Halle Bailey-led production is actually served right by not only its audience but its studio, as opposed to a Mena starring a picture. So I think there's some interesting dynamics here playing out. Very inadvisable. I wouldn't have done it. OG, I don't even know where he's getting the fact that this thing might not make $1 billion and might not have rewatchability. It actually very much might.
I think it's more so a classic psych out. They usually call that like a classic psych out. It's like it kind of. They use it like with big time competitions. It's like it softens your competition. It doesn't make you go out to think that you're going to be overly successful than you are. That's what they call it. They call it a classic psycho.
Well, the thing that is weird to me is like, and I've said this before, I have very little desire to see this mermaid movie. I really don't. To me, I put it on the same level as the Aladdin live action movie, or just about any of the other live action movies. It's kind of whatever, it's no better, no worse than any of these other ones. It's just funny to me, like Mena's like out here talking like Aladdin was some like grand masterpiece, some amazing movie. People went back to see it. Like Aladdin was just so special. It's like your movie didn't look any better than this one, dude. Like, come on,
it's like I said, inadvisable. I wouldn't have done it, especially for my career prospects in Hollywood. I believe has he deleted the tweet? I'm not sure. Anyway, you might want to think about that.
He deactivated his Twitter. He completely deactivated his Twitter. So he went nuclear.
Well, like I said, inadvisable, right? But these optics things are a very interesting game in Hollywood, and how people react to those. For example, bringing it back to Indiana Jones 5 discussion for a little bit. Again, Indiana Jones 5 gets kind of a more mediocre response than maybe the company was anticipating, right? Bob Iger is there. He had to have known that internally this thing didn't test super strong, but he decides to make his first appearance at Cannes here for this film. That's a very interesting thing playing out. At the same time this is actually going on, Willow's being announced to be taken off Disney Plus, and the Galactic Starcruiser, one of the most ambitious things that Disney has done ever in cooperation with Lucasfilm, is shutting down, blindsiding Kathleen Kennedy as she leaves the theater. This is all very interesting.
What I think is funny with Willow is the transitional of how it was supposed to get a season 2, and they had made that announcement Willow was getting a season 2, and then it went from getting a season 2 to canceling season 2 to now it being completely removed off the Disney Plus platform.
Did they announce that there was going to get a season? Because I think the writer said that they had written a season 2. We'll see.
I could have sworn. I'm not 100% sure. I thought they said it was confirmed that it was getting a season 2. I could be wrong.
Willow makes its premiere on the 30th of November 2022. I don't know how many episodes it actually had, but a few weeks later, obviously, we're now talking into 2023. And in the course of 5 months, this thing is now being announced to be taken off the platform, and it's better as a tax write-off, even with that impairment fee, than it is actually providing content for Disney Plus.
And I think it's so funny that
which is amazing.
And to think that they use these things as headliners. Like when I was at the D23 Expo, they had a whole section of Disney live action on the Disney live action panel that was dedicated to Willow. Yep. It was like a 20-25 minute where it showed clips of the show. They brought the actors out on the stage, and it's like, no, it's like all that's in vain, because it's like you create these heavy ambitious build-ups, and it's like, and then it just like falls flat on its face.
So why leak this thing going away at that time while Kathleen Kennedy is in front of the media as she is? You know, why? I mean, if this thing didn't even get 6 months. This is very unorthodox.
Well, didn't we all say that once Indiana Jones comes out, this is going to be kind of Kennedy's departure?
Well, and here's the thing too. There's a lot going on here, and I know a lot of people kind of poo-poo the Kennedy stuff because there's been a million rumors for years now on her leaving, and I totally understand when people are skeptical.
Bantha poo-poo.
Yes, exactly. But here's the thing, and Dre, you hit the nail on the head. There's something afoot with this, and I know this is gonna sound real conspiratorial, but there's something afoot with this because, like you said, Dre, they dropped the Starcruiser news the day of the Indy 5 premiere at Cannes. That was major. And before that, same day, they dropped the Lake Nona news, which they knew would make major national news because of the DeSantis drama right now.
Sure.
So you had the Lake Nona drama that they put the pullback. You had the Starcruiser, the Willow news, all of it.
All of it at the same time. The Willow news, all of it.
Right.
So it's like, why were these decisions made? Look, Iger he's a master at this kind of media orchestration where they can shape a narrative, craft a narrative, provide a narrative, right? And seemingly, take momentum out of one executive, put it towards another. Like, we saw this a lot with the Chapek era, interestingly enough, where he was being stymied at every single turn. Was that because of Iger's influence? I mean, it's interesting. When asked about Variety providing one of the first reviews for Indy 5, he actually said, "Oh man, I'm relieved." Why did he say that? Why did he say that if we are supposed to believe that there is no tie specifically to Iger towards some of these media outlets? I think there is. I think this is revelatory that there might be.
That's especially weird that he said. I didn't even know he said that. That's especially weird that he felt relieved with Variety, because Variety was the one who really pushed the lukewarm reception.
Isn't that interesting?
Like, that was weird.
I don't know. I mean, if we're going to give him the benefit of the doubt, maybe he thought that they would go light on the film compared to some of the others. I don't know. Apparently he was very relieved though that Variety got the first article up. But it's putting Indiana Jones in a very, very bad position, because now that's been premiered at Cannes, and you have some of these first reviews being posted. Now people for the next 6 weeks, OG, I think you pointed this out, which I think is a brilliant point. For the next 6 weeks, people are going to see that Rotten Tomatoes score, and they're going to see those bad reviews and reinforce this idea that this is a bad film, rather than convincing people that you should see this film because it is Indiana Jones' swan song. I think that was deliberate. I think that's a way to get back at Kathleen Kennedy, all things considered, because of the timing of all of these things. Just like ending the Lake Nona project is a way to get back at DeSantis.
Yeah.
And as we always say on this channel, a coincidence is never a coincidence.
It's not. No, especially not with Bob Iger. Bob Iger is a brilliant chess player. And for him to drop 3 bombshells the day of the Indy premiere, 3, the Disney Plus Purge, the Starcruiser, and the Lake Nona news, all within the same day of Indy 5, I don't know, like, something's going on with that. Do you think they're going to do that with Little Mermaid? You think when Little Mermaid's opening weekend comes about, they're going to drop 3 major news stories like that? No, there's not a chance in hell they're going to do that. No way. Because Disney believes in that Mermaid movie, and they believe in it quite a bit. Obviously, they don't believe in Indy 5. They wanted to bury that Cannes Film Festival news with all this other stuff.
Because you couldn't, I mean, I was looking at, just like the mass market news feeds, Google News feed, what is it? Microsoft's news feed. There's a couple of others that I kind of look at to see what the normies are being told. I couldn't even find Indiana Jones 5 reviews anywhere. At most, I got was there was a teary reception from Harrison Ford at Cannes. That was the most I ever got. So they definitely buried that news. Unfortunately, it is kind of percolating through as it tends to do. But I mean, the day that all of this stuff was announced, between Lake Nona, between the Indiana Jones 5 reviews, between the Starcruiser, just all this stuff, it was a dark day for Disney. This was a tough few hours there. That I think will ultimately reshape the company in some ways. Look, I mean, is Kathleen Kennedy out the door? I think you have to agree that she's not in the best position right now, for sure, especially because she wasn't, I guess, told about some of these things that were actually happening when they took place. Her being left out of the loop, I think, is interesting. Like Nona, the Starcruiser, when was the last time you even heard of a Disney resort closing? I have never heard of that. At most, it's reimagined to something else, but or put on hiatus during that period. This was a dark time. This was a dark day here.
Yeah, and they have to, and they have to when you have extraordinary circumstances, you have to respond in bold ways. And that's why it kind of brings me full circle to what I was saying earlier on in this conversation with David Zaslav. And, I know a lot of people didn't like when he canceled Batgirl. I know a lot of people don't like when he cancels all these projects, and it seems like so extreme and this, that, and the other. But you have to understand that these studios, they're under a lot of pressure right now. They are not doing well. And to be honest with you, when Bob Iger at that quarterly earnings call the other day said that we want to bring Hulu into Disney Plus, I was kind of disappointed, because I like the idea of being bold right now. I think you need to be bold, and you need to think differently and really kind of aim for the fences. And I think the Hulu Disney Plus merger felt very boring. It felt like a decision that should have been made like a year and a half ago, not right now when things are really, really rough. And I think that these moves that he's making right now, canceling the Starcruiser and like Nona, those are more bold moves that I think, while negative, I think I feel more optimistic overall, just because I feel like that's the kind of move that should be being made right now. When you have an extraordinary time, you got to respond a lot more bold way, and it just needs to be done. Go ahead, Dre.
I was going to say that was a fantastic point of juxtaposing the recent announcements coming out from the Disney company to Zaslav and making those bold decisions to put that company, that new entity, in a path of profitability. Right, you have to make some tough decisions, and I guess I wasn't expecting Iger to make those decisions, but he actually is. In addition, they are bringing on they are doing some interesting things, specifically with ESPN. Right, Pat McAfee is now part of the as the ESPN network. He may have got some pushback because selling out to corporate overlords or whatever, but that is a huge gain for ESPN right there. He has been on the kind of the forefront of this kind of more youth orientated, kind of lay back, down to earth type, kind of almost independent feeling kind of media, sports media content. So to bring him into the fold, I think is really, really interesting. I think they are making some bold moves right here. Yeah. Like you said, the Hulu thing wasn't necessarily encouraging. I mean, that's what Chapek was talking about over some years ago. Do we necessarily make the same decisions now? It's very interesting, but give them credit. At least they're making the hard decisions now in order to thrive later. That's very challenging.
It is. Now, I want to give credit to our friend, the friend of the channel, Alia. She brought this up to me, and I think this is a very, very interesting. It's all tied to this. So, I guess Matt Bellani. She's a we're all fans, to be honest, of Matt Bellani. But Matt Bellani was saying that if Disney moves forward with this plan for ESPN to go straight to streaming, I believe.
Yes.
That news dropped a few days ago. It would completely destroy linear cable TV.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It would.
Which is
because even the earnings call, they were touting, hey, sports was a segment of our linear business that was doing very, very well and driving that segment of the business forward. You're exactly right, Ochi. They take ESPN off and some of their sports related content. Where's your driver for that linear legacy distribution channel?
Right, and what does that mean though for the conversations with Comcast and Hulu? Is Disney using that as a threat? Hey, we'll tank your cable business if you don't play ball. Well, we'll go ahead and put ESPN on the streamer, and where are you at now? Is that possibly what's going on with that as well?
Because those cable contracts were negotiated in such a way that you had to get ESPN if you wanted a cable subscription, right? Which inflated the price and so forth. So when you take ESPN out,
Lowers the
it's
value.
kind of like the DirecTV thing with I think it was DirecTV. Satellite company. I don't remember actually now. They used to have NFL Sunday Ticket, right? And a lot of people would get that specific cable company product in order to get NFL Sunday Ticket, where you could get all the NFL games no matter where you lived to your home. Well, when that went to YouTube, how do you think that satellite company is doing now? Because a lot of people were only getting it for that specific product. Now it's with YouTube, that whole thing has changed. In a similar way, do we foresee ESPN changing the kind of cable landscape if they pull out and have all of their content streaming? We have heard Iger talk about how they want to put more stuff on ESPN Plus and have more of that switched over to DTC. There are some chess moves being played out here on a very large scale between corporate giants. It's going to be interesting to see how Iger navigates those waters.
Yep. Yeah, it's wild, man. It's absolutely wild. I love this stuff, though, dude. I do. I eat this stuff up for breakfast.
Apparently, I'm not the only one that goes balls to the wall.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
But I want to thank you, fellas, for joining me today. It's been a plethora of news. It's been great topics, and I want to thank everyone who is watching this video. We are 2 hours in, and we thank you for joining today on Citrus Corner. Before I get into the fellas giving out their social medias, I just have a quick minor note to put out that we are still continuing to strive with this channel. We want it to grow. We want as many people on here as possible. And just as a quick reminder, if this channel can hit up to 5,000 subscribers, we are giving away a $100 Disney gift card to a special subscriber. So definitely please keep those subscribes coming, smash those like buttons, and we greatly appreciate it. So I'm gonna
Nothing can stop us now.
there we go. I'm going to start down with Mr. VashSky, host of Freshly Squeezed. Go ahead and let everyone know where they can find you on social media, sir.
Hey, the best place to find me on social media is going to be at VashSky on Twitter. It's right down there. Just go ahead, type it in, and it should pop up for, as Christine Waysense McCarthy herself would say, for all the
Robust
discussion right there. We're seeing more of her, which is very interesting. We'll see what that means. And if you want to see me, well, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right now at Orange Grove 55, where we have some amazing shows, including the one you're watching, Citrus Corner, where we talk about everything Walt Disney World related, hosted by my dear friend, George, right up there. We have Orange Grove 55 and Orange Nerd, which you got a taste of at the end of this video, hosted by the amazing Orange Grove 55, right up there, where we talk about C-Suite, all the entertainment industry news, even some theme park news from occasion. So definitely subscribe for that. Story Geeks with Jay, where we talk about the stories that impact our lives. We've been talking about some amazing stuff, Guardians of the Galaxy related, Mandalorian related, all of that. Definitely subscribe for that show. And, well, the network includes my own Freshly Squeezed, your source for juice, news, and info, squeezed fresh right from the Grove.
And Drake, because it's been a while, man, since I played this drop, and it just, you know what, we got to play it, dude. This is the gold standard for drops right here.
And there's the biggest bargain of all.
There we
go.
go. We haven't played that in forever. I mean, this is hold on, one more time. This is so good, so good.
And there's the biggest bargain of all.
There you go. Thanks, Walt.
Right. There we go. And of course, the man that makes it all happen, who created this wonderful platform for us to play at, the fabulous, the wonderful, the one and only Mr. OG55 himself.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, George, for having me on and Vash on Citrus Corner, talking Starcruiser, Lake Nona, like Universal, Minions Cafe, all that good stuff. A little even Indiana Jones. It was really a good time, George. So I want to thank you so much, brother, for having us on. And I'll kick us off with. I gotta say, you know what? I just added that drop. I gotta say, I was really critical of this parade. Like when I watched it on YouTube, and I know this is this is very ill-advised. I know you shouldn't judge things based on YouTube or whatever, but I'm a human and I do. I just do. And I watched this parade on online and I'm like, oh, this is so mid, man. This is mid. This is kind of like whatever. Dude, I watched this parade in person and I fell in love with it. I fell in love with it. The energy for Magic Happens. Everyone in the crowd is moving and shit. Like everyone loves them.
Well,
it's
I have
fantastic.
to. Well, actually, just that little bit, it makes you want to get up and dance and everything. And I have to say, I have not yet seen it in person. This will be actually my first time when I come out in in a week.
Yeah, dude, I'm telling you, check it out. It's a banger. You'll enjoy it.
Absolutely. I can't wait. And so I want to thank you all for joining me and my brothers on this Citrus Corner episode. And before we exit out, OG, come on, one more time. Magic Happens. Let's
here we go. There we go. Well, thank you, George, for having us on, brother. Citrus Corner, the Walt Disney World Show, hosted by the amazing Citrus George, the Family Man 23. Give it up for George.
That's right.
Thank you very much. But really quick, if you want to find me on my YouTube channel, Disney Family Man 23, you can find me also on Twitter at Disney George. I'm part of a podcast called A Walk with Walt. And of course, you'll find me here on my home base with Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info.
Perfect.
Thank you, good sir. Take care, everybody.